Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Gridiron Review. Alongside Bill Wagner, I'm Pete Medhurst. Today is the day where we're finalizing youth football standings.
Playoffs, baby. Playoffs.
Tuesday, Pedro's going to get in that big conference room. Me and Jeff Porter and Sue Hamilton, we're going to assign fields to all of these playoff games that are coming up, and of course, which will culminate in championship weekend, the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th here around Arundel County. Severn Park, of course, will be the host on Saturday for all of the championship day for the American Division games. We've had some terrific races and a lot of these. And in years past, Bill, where I think we've had at least some strong leans going into the playoffs about who might win championships, I think this year we may have some divisions where there are 2 or 3 teams that, depending on how the playoff draw shakes out, that could conceivably win the championship, and I think that's better for everybody involved when you have more teams that may have a chance to win headed into the playoffs.
Right, well, we already heard from, we've talked about it on the show several times, there's been some upsets, some teams that were perennial powers and got upset during the regular season. So I agree, it's going to be wide open, it's going to be fun to see who ends up there at Severn Park High on November the 9th, that's the American, and then we have games also Sunday and Monday of that weekend in the other divisions. It might be a good time to give a shout out to Mike Bush, the late great Mike Bush, who you and I love so much.
Yep.
This playoff run, a lot of games are going to be on turf fields at the high schools. I mean, this is a dramatic change from years gone by, even to the point where my kids were playing youth football and all the games were held at the local sites, and if there was rain, it could be an issue. I mean, I remember the GORC field used to get pretty swampy.
It was a deluge. Most fields this time of year, like we had terrible rain on Sunday, this weekend.
Yeah.
Okay. That would have wiped out an entire playoff schedule with all the rain that we had this past week because, you don't want to play those big games. You don't want to play them in those conditions. No. And obviously many of those fields they're just deluged. It's like the Redskin game yesterday.
Right. It changed the entire tenor of the game. I mean, it was survival football, but Mike Bush, who was a director with the Recreation and Parks Department, but more known as the Speaker of the House of the General Assembly. He was largely responsible for getting turf fields at every single high school in Anne Arundel County, and those turf fields will be utilized particularly at the end for the championship weekend, and that's a tribute to Mike Bush, and we'll remember him that weekend.
No doubt about it. We've got, I think, 16 now overall, and obviously 17th coming on board with a new Crofton High School. So plenty of opportunities to play on the turf coming up out there. And of course, again, get the commissioners this week. We'll get everything firmed up, and all those schedules will be on the county website coming up by the close of business on Tuesday.
And can I implore the folks, parents, supporters, coaches, we know this is the competitive time, the playoffs, and you want to win that trophy that Pete always talks about. Please stay calm. Keep your cool. It's just a game. Just don't go crazy on the officials. Let's not have ugliness. It's playoff time. This is time to celebrate youth football and all of what's been a great season and finish it on a positive note. Let's please not have any nastiness just because you want to win that plastic trophy.
No plastic trophy. Look, I'll tell you what. You go down to Trophy Shop down the street and you can get one for Johnny for $5.99, make him feel like he's the MVP of the team. Hey, your coach gave this to me. I mean, come on. I mean, it's not really that hard. It's $5.99. All right, go down the street and buy yourself a trophy. Let's talk South River High here because we had a great time. First of all, great time at the Hall of Fame banquet this past week, honoring Joe Papetti, Tenardo Sharps, obviously terrific connections with Anne Arundel County football, and the South River turnout and the Glen Burnie turnout for Coach Papetti was simply amazing.
Yes.
Obviously from Joe's first team at Glen Burnie, and then Mitch Suplee and the players for Joe Papetti, they did a great job coming together on social media, getting out there, and obviously social media is such a tremendous asset when used correctly. They had a heck of a turnout to support Coach Papetti.
Yeah, 7 tables worth of former players. We're talking about 70 guys showing up. And I thought his son, Joe Papetti, his namesake, he's not junior, but he's the second Joe Papetti. I thought he did a terrific job in his acceptance speech on behalf of his father. And how cool was it? Pat O'Malley, the longtime sports writer for the Baltimore Sun, and he used to do a weekly high school radio show on WNEV on Saturday mornings, and he pulls out a recording of an interview he did with Coach Papetti and Mitch Suplee following a big win for South River in, I guess that was 1987 or 88, one of those.
86.
It was 86?
86 against Broadneck because they had been upset by Northeast the previous week, and then they were playing us the week after that.
The rivalry game, right.
And it was a good game. We lost 14-7 that game. But they beat
South River.
Right, they beat Broadneck 19-14. Travis Naylor had a big game, and Pat had interviewed Travis and Mitch and Coach Papetti. And I know it had to, as Mitch said, man, there weren't many dry eyes when you heard Coach Papetti on the tape talking about his football team.
Right, the man's been dead a long time, and so for those players to hear that voice again, it brought tears to their eyes. And also, Tenardo Sharps, the great Meade High tailback that went on to star at Temple University, was inducted into the Hall of Fame, and so was Craig Wilson, who went into the Hall of Fame for his exploits as a baseball player and reaching the major leagues, but was a Rhodes Trophy winner as a star quarterback at Annapolis High. So there are a lot of Anne Arundel County high school football connections on hand at the Hall of Fame banquet.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And that brings us to South River football of today. And Eddie Dolch has done a terrific job with this program, getting it up to not only up to speed, but now they find themselves at 7-0. They've got a bona fide first-team potential all-county quarterback, first-team all-county running back.
First-team all-county wide receiver.
Yes, I mean, there's so many weapons, and more importantly, their defense is also playing well. The other night, man, they got locked up in a shootout with Josh Ehrlich and Broadneck, and on the road, it's always tougher to win away from your stadium. And to do what they did on the road the other night, out shooting Broadneck 48-41, just a tremendous win to get the Seahawks to 7-0.
Well, I like what Coach Dolch said, and he has maintained this mentality all season. He has made sure the Seahawks don't get full of themselves and think they are the it thing. He told them that going into Broadneck, which had been the perennial power in the Anne Arundel County, a couple undefeated seasons of recent, he made sure they were the underdog and had the underdog mentality. And I tell you what, Broadneck gave them a heck of a fight. Broadneck's not been the greatest season for Broadneck, certainly by Broadneck standards, but they showed up and gave South River all it could handle in this game. And, you got Josh Ehrlich. I was asking Catherine Fomenique, our reporter, what she thought was up with Broadneck. And apparently the big problem is their offensive line. They took some losses on the offensive line, and Josh Ehrlich's been running for his life, quite honestly. He's still a good quarterback. He's putting up decent numbers, but it hasn't been quite what we expected out of Broadneck. But a big win for South River. And now you got to figure 7-0, and they've been through a couple of the tougher opponents. This could be an undefeated season, which has never happened at South River. Now, the odd thing, it's going to be a 9-0 undefeated season because they're only playing 9 regular season games. So they are going to want to continue that in the playoffs. But this is an excellent South River team. And now here's something for you. I was talking to Catherine about who would be the Rhodes Trophy nominee and Player of the Year nominee from South River. Would it be Faust, the quarterback, or Johnson, the running back? They both have been instrumental to that offense.
No question. Clifford, the wide receiver, also had a terrific year. And I think, and you talk about wholly backloaded schedule, Batman, South River and Old Mill coming up this week, as if beating Broadneck last week wasn't enough for South River. We got another king-size matchup coming up on Friday.
Corrected then. They haven't been through all the big boys. Yeah, that's going to be a huge showdown. Old Mill has won 6 in a row, as we'll discuss moving forward.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Let's go to, obviously, Meade. Michael Anthony with an interception return. They get a couple of touchdown passes in the contest. They beat North County. Meade's won 4 in a row now for Mike Francis. Tenardo Sharp's the offensive coordinator there. But their defense stepped up really big with a couple of scores this week. And this is a team now that I think is also kind of rounding back into form here at the right time as we head toward the playoff march. And when you look around the county, Chesapeake fell behind Southern 6-0. There was a scoreless first half. Southern jumped down on top 6-0. And against that caliber of an opponent, that's kind of new for the Bulldogs here of late. But Chesapeake finally got their act in gear, won by a score of 29-13. And that does lead us to Old Mill. And look, after 1 week, there are a lot of people, social media-wise, after Old Mill went down to Douglas and Croom and lost to the Eagles by a score of 30-0. They haven't lost since.
No.
So, I think sometimes you lose one game. Losing one game is that can be kind of fluky. Losing a couple more, sure, then you got a problem. Old Mill hadn't lost since then, especially as they've gotten back into their county schedule, Bill. And again, this is another team that appears to be peaking at the right time. And you talk about a titanic matchup coming up this week between Old Mill and South River. Can't wait.
Yeah, well, in Old Mill, Arundel has been their outstanding tailback. This week, the quarterback threw 3 touchdown passes, which, Old Mill is usually a ground and pound, so you factor in that you can get some scores through the air, and it makes them all the more dangerous. But Old Mill is being Old Mill, which we've become accustomed to under head coach Chad McCormick, always in the thick of things. This is going to be an exciting game coming up this week. I'm really eager to see what happens with that. You had mentioned Meade. First year head coach Mike Francis, and Mike had a little bit of a health scare last week with his wife. He was supposed to be at the Anne Arundel County Sports Hall of Fame to support his offensive coordinator, Tenardo Sharps, and it turned out his wife had to be admitted to the emergency room with a health scare, and Mike couldn't make it, and he was understandably upset. And Tenardo Sharps showing his class after his big night, getting inducted in the Anne Arundel County Sports Hall of Fame. Where did he go directly from Michael's 8th Avenue? To the hospital to support Mike Francis. But with a lot going on, last week for Meade and their coaches, they remained focused, and Coach Francis said they had some goals. Winning record. They set 3 or 4 goals, and right now they've hit all their goals. Win back-to-back games. They've won 4 in a row. I mean, everything he set out from the beginning, they have accomplished. And now he said, from here on out, we're looking at playoff seeding and positioning ourselves for the playoffs, and Meade is a team that could do some things.
And as I've said all along, we talked about this on the show too. The one thing that I've been impressed with what Mike has done, Mike's not just coaching football there.
No,
this has become a community-wide, coaching life and football together, and in a community that I think will embrace that. And I think it's great that Mike and his coaches. And look, I tweeted this immediately and said it on Facebook within the football message board last Wednesday night, right? I mean, literally the moment Tenardo Sharps stopped speaking, I hope all the people there went back into the community and talked about the quality of the speech that Tenardo Sharps gave.
Fantastic.
Those are the kind of people that we want in our school buildings, on our practice fields. Those are the kind of role models that our kids need to take advantage of. When
Absolutely.
You have a resource like Tenardo Sharps to take advantage of.
And Mike Francis is the same way.
Those are the people, not every high school coach does that. Not every high school coach invests that extra time to do that. And I think when you have someone that's willing to do that, I think we need to lift these people up and talk about the quality that they're trying to affect, not only on the field, but in the community for these kids as well.
All right, well, and Mike Francis did a good thing. He loaded his staff up with former Meade High players. I saw at the Hall of Fame banquet, Lonnie Pierce was there, one of the great tailbacks in the history of Meade High School, and he's helping out with the staff. And these are guys that have pride in the school. These are guys that have gone on to be successful in life as Meade High graduates, and they can show these kids, you can become like me. And so I think it's fantastic. But a couple other interesting results, and Spalding went on the road up at Calvert Hall, and I thought Spalding would win this game, and Calvert Hall got the better of them in a low-scoring affair. And
late touchdown to make it a 23-17 win for the Cardinals in that one. So
puts a hurt on Spalding's chances of winning the MIAA conference. They're going to be playing Mount St. Joe. They got McDonough coming up this week, and then Mount St. Joe the following week. But that was a tough loss for Spalding, and I was a little surprised by that.
Yeah, but still, no days off in the A conference.
No.
If you don't bring it for a full game, for full 48 minutes, then you have some problems. ACS finally gets a win. They beat Severn by a score of 10-6, and it's just been a tough year. It's a tough year in terms of numbers for Severn, been a tough year in terms of offensive output, and AACS finally getting off the schneid as they get a victory. And it's been a rare, rough season for AACS as well. They're not used to that. Over there as well.
All right, Annapolis Area Christian School's been competing for championships, and this is a little bit of a blip on the radar. Ryan Eidelman's a good quarterback. He had a nice game, kind of was the key in that victory over Severn. But you're right, Severn just, their numbers are low and they're struggling offensively. I mean, they only scored 6 points in this one. This is the one game you think they might be able to win against another winless team. So that was kind of a big win, good for AACS to get a victory. And then the other private school, St. Mary's, just keeps on running is what I say, because in addition to Alex Wicks having 156 yards, they had another tailback go for over 100. They had 2 guys combined for almost 300 yards.
Remember in Annapolis, they had the running Panthers under John Brady. Now we got the running Saints down there.
Coach
on the
Jason
football
Bedroni,
field.
he wants to ground and pound just like old Mill
But you know what?
does.
That's great, though. Have a philosophy, stick to it,
I agree.
win games with it. As long as you're winning, isn't that all that matters?
They've been winning B Conference championships with this philosophy, and they're in the mix again. That was a nice win over John Carroll.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how you get it, baby. It's just all about the W's. W. See, Nationals, by the way, they've had some curly W's. They're headed to the World Series. Coming up, Bill and I are going to talk about colleges this week. Tough loss from Maryland as they are without Josh Jackson, the quarterback, and certainly hurt them this week against Indiana. And the Navy midshipmen rolling 5-1, headed to a huge clash with Tulane coming up this week. Back with more on a Gridiron Review. Welcome back. Bill and I were in Annapolis this past week. Navy with a surprising rout of South Florida. Bill, we thought South Florida coming in with 2 wins in a row. Big power running game to beat UConn and BYU. And Navy's defense just dismantled them on Saturday, winning by a score of 35-3. We've been around this team for a long time, and my colleague Joe Miller does the color on the game. She does a lot of great statistical background during the course of the game. You got to go back into like the late 70s and early 80s to find these kind of defensive numbers when George Welsh was coaching at the academy, when the Mids have played this kind of defense this consistently after 6 games into a season.
Yeah, well, I've been covering the team for 2 decades now, and never have I used the word dominant to describe the Navy defense, but lo and behold, they were absolutely dominant against USF. USF came in, there was no disguising, they were going to run. They wanted to run between the tackles, pound Navy, wear them down. That's what had been successful for them. Beat BYU, which, by the way, BYU turns around and beats Boise State, knocks them out of the top spot for the Access Bowl is what they call it, Group of 5 Access Bowl. And now at American Athletic Conference schools probably got the lead for that.
Undefeated SMU, UCF, Memphis is back in the top 25, so even Navy could get into this thing if they can win out in the conference and still have a shot at that. So it's amazing it's amazing right now. I know both Navy got both votes in both the AP and
9
the coaches
votes.
polled this week. So I think that's like 7 or 8 teams now either in the poll or getting votes.
That's right.
In the top 25 from the American Athletic
great
Conference. It's been fantastic. Malcolm Perry, another pretty solid ball game on the ground for the midshipmen. Jamel Carruthers also coming up now, giving
He's
Nelson
a revelation.
Smith, yeah, he's giving Nelson Smith another guy to kind of give him a blow at the B-back position for the Mids, as he had a 58-yard touchdown run on Saturday.
Pulled away. I mean, he's a converted slot back, so you know he's got some speed. I tell you what, you go back and look at Jamel Carruthers' career at Bowling Green High School in Kentucky, record-setting, rushed for almost 4,000 career yards. He was the Mr. Kentucky football. I mean, so this guy can play, and when he got into the clear, there was nobody catching him. He looked like Malcolm Perry sometimes does when once he gets in the open, I always say it, right? As soon as he gets in the open, I say, gone, gone. Nobody's catching Malcolm Perry.
No doubt.
People think they have the angle, and they never do. But now this was a story of defense, and Brian Newberry, the first-year coordinator, boy, is he doing a terrific job. And, I mean, held South Florida without a touchdown. That's all that needs to be said. Hasn't happened at Navy very often in the last 20 years, I can tell you that.
Yeah, Jacob Springer was the American Athletic Conference Defensive Player of the Week this week because he had 3 sacks, first player to do that.
And a forced fumble.
Yeah, since Will Anthony back in 2015. Meanwhile, over at Maryland, Indiana was in town for a game, and the Hoosiers escape with the victory 34-28. One wonders, though, if Maryland was at full strength in some capacity. They've been torn up by injuries, especially the quarterback Josh Jackson. I think Terrell Pigram plays hard, but I just don't think he's not a Big Ten quarterback. And, Mike Loxley now is hamstrung trying to play him. He got banged up a little bit, obviously, on Saturday. Not for a lack of effort from the Terps, just not, I think, a lack of bullets in the chamber right now as Indiana is playing a little bit better. They win it by a score of 34-28.
Yeah, well, you said it, Pete. To compete in the Big Ten, you're going to have good quarterbacks, and you need more than one of them because you got to presume that over the course of the year, there's a chance your starter may get nicked up, and when you go to that backup, he's got to be a quality player. they've got some guys in the pipeline. There's a guy there, Lance Legendre from Louisiana, that's a good player. They want to redshirt him this year.
He's a cage.
He'll be a good player, and they've got a quarterback coming in who's pretty good. So they need to build their depth at quarterback. They thought they had great depth at running back, but one by one they've fallen by the wayside. Jake Funk, Anthony McFarland did not play this week. They did get a good game out of Leak.
Yeah.
He had a nice run for a touchdown and over 100 yards, but too many mistakes, and it was Leak that committed the fumble at the end. He took a swing pass and got stripped, and that was the end of the Maryland's hopes for a comeback. And Maryland really has just kind of fallen apart here. I did not ever think they could lose at Purdue, which is not a good team and not having a great season.
And Purdue didn't have Rondale Moore or Elijah Sindelar, their two top stars on offense.
And they took Maryland apart, and then you come home and think, we'll get healthy at home, and they did not. And I don't think Maryland's going to make a bowl now. They've got 3 wins. They've got Ohio State coming up. They got Michigan. They're playing at Minnesota this coming week. Minnesota's undefeated. So I can't count up 3 wins on the remaining schedule.
Nope, no doubt about that. Coming up, the Redskins and Ravens going in 2 completely different directions.
Yes.
Ravens with a huge win on the road, the Redskins with a bad loss in the mud. We'll talk about that when we come back on the Gridiron Review. Welcome back. Lamar Jackson threw for over 9,000 yards in college. Some folks thought he was this neophyte of a quarterback that can't throw at all. Well, what we found out is Greg Roman and John Harbaugh have put together an offense that takes advantage of his ability to throw, and he runs selected times during the course of the game when it needs to make a big play. Never more evident than on display this week. Also, 2 defensive touchdowns for the Baltimore Ravens, Marcus Peters and Marlon Humphrey. Peters playing in his initial game with the Ravens after being acquired via trade, paying immediate dividends for Baltimore, who goes to Seattle and wins 30-16. That's an impressive road win.
Huge victory. Seattle does not lose very often at home. Their fans are frankly stunned. They couldn't believe it. The way the game Baltimore Ravens just took over the game in the second half. And Lamar Jackson was the star. I mean, what he does with his feet is remarkable. I mean, you think you've got him penned up in the backfield, and next thing you know, boop, 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 he's gone, gaining 15 yards, a first down, and he's showing great leadership. I mean, he's really, it's a world of difference from Mr. Joe Flacco, who looked like he was half dead out there. Didn't seem to give a care about anything. And Lamar Jackson is very excitable, very demonstrative, and I like the way he plays. And the defense was terrific. This Marcus Peters pickup is clearly already paid dividends. The guy that only practiced a few times with the Ravens and yet makes a huge play. So that is a terrific win for the Ravens. And that they got a bye this week, and then the New England Patriots are coming to M&T Bank Stadium. That is going to be a great game.
It's going to be interesting to see what kind of defensive concoction Coach Belichick comes up with trying to contain Lamar Jackson in that football game. Ravens atop the AFC North now at 5-2. Meanwhile, the Redskins, they're not on top of anything. 1-6 now. And, oh, by the way, you're going to Minnesota Thursday to face Kirk Cousins, who just threw for 4 touchdown passes, over 300 yards, and a 42-30 win over Detroit. Kyle Shanahan got his revenge and presented a game ball to his father. Now, I wonder if the Vikings are going to be loaded for bear here and present a game ball to Kirk Cousins on Thursday night if they beat the Redskins. It's a real tough turnaround for Washington. Here's the one thing I will say. Bill Callahan has said, look, here's going to be our philosophy. We're going to power run the ball. We're going to run the ball. We're going to run the ball. That's what we're going to hang our hat on here, at least for the rest of the season. They did that, and they did it well enough that in the weather conditions, a missed field goal, they had another drive that was deep into San Francisco territory, and Adrian Peterson fumbled. Those drives may have been enough to win the football game, but the fear of throwing the ball downfield, at least Jimmy Garoppolo threw to George Kittle, their big tight end, when San Francisco had to. 3 field goals, trumps here, 9-0 San Francisco in the mud.
Well, it's just what happens when you are a losing team. You find ways to lose. I mean, Adrian Peterson, I do like the idea that they're going to pound the ball, and Adrian Peterson ran well, but when he got down into the red zone, he had a fumble that was hugely costly. He also got stopped on a 3rd and 1 that was a big play. I mean, he says he's a big-time Hall of Fame running back. You got to get a yard. So, I don't know what's up with the Redskins. This is the lost season. One victory over a horrible Miami Dolphins team. And who are the Redskins going to beat?
The rest of the season? Nobody.
Probably not.
Nobody. Well, wait a minute. Let's rephrase. They do have the Jets coming up. That could be a 50-50 game, even though Sam Darnold and the Jets beat the Cowboys. So that you never know. Maybe Sam Darnold throws for 4 touchdowns against the Redskins. They're not beating the Bills. I love the Bills. By the way, Bills 5-1.
Yeah, they're looking pretty good.
Nobody talks about my boy Josh Allen in the AFC, but the Bills are sitting there at 5-1.
Right. Well, here's all you need to know about the Redskins, the state of the Redskins. I happened to be in West End Grill at 1 o'clock on this past Sunday, and I didn't see a single Redskins fan. And the Redskins were playing live. There was TVs showing the Redskins. I saw Oakland Raiders fans. I saw Buffalo Bills fans. I saw Baltimore Ravens fans in there early waiting for their 4:30 game. I didn't see a single Washington Redskins fan. That's how apathetic the fan base is. They don't want to go out to the West End Grill to watch the Redskins. It's too depressing.
I said this on our radio show. If I'm Dan Snyder, I want to make more money, okay? If I'm not making much money because nobody's coming to my stadium, nobody's buying my concession, nobody's paying for my outrageous parking, how do I do that? Oh, fire Bruce Allen? Well, I'm not going to do that. Well, I guarantee you, if you fire Bruce Allen tomorrow, the next home game, that place would be packed because the fans would say, finally, hallelujah. Right. You want Dan Snyder to remain the owner because Dan Snyder spends money. The alternative is not spending any money and going nowhere with your franchise. So you want to keep Dan the owner. You just want Dan to have a revelation to realize, hey, I got to get somebody else in here to run the football operation.
Right. I mean, everybody complains about Dan Snyder. And I mean, Chris Samuels went into the Redskins Ring of Honor and he told a story during his induction about what Dan Snyder did for him when his brother was seriously ill and they didn't know if he was going to live or die. And Dan Snyder flew his entire family down to Tampa to be there. He stopped at 4 different places on the way with his private plane, didn't charge a dime. Dan Snyder is willing to spend, and he cares about the Redskins. Dan Snyder's problem is he's never been able to get the right people in place to make decisions and allow them to make decisions. I do think he has a problem with meddling and being too involved, and he has had numerous mistakes when it comes to who is in charge of getting the talent. And I agree, Bruce Allen's got to go. How anyone cannot see that Bruce Allen has to go is beyond me.
I don't know. If I own a business, I want to make the most money. I'm going to figure out how to do it. And if I don't have the people in place that are going to make me the most money, I'm going to go get the people that are going to make me the most money, like Bill Wagner. He's big money. I want to thank all the folks out of the Hall of Fame. I want to thank David Cassard, my former fellow Southern Bulldog teammate down there in Harwood, for the invitation to the Hall of Fame banquet this past week. Had a great time, and certainly look forward to hanging out with some of the Hall of Famers in the future. For Bill Wagner, I'm Pete Medhurst. We'll talk to you next week on the Gridiron Review.